Question 1. What is the term for an environmental variable that momentarily changes the effectiveness of a stimulus as a reinforcer and the current frequency of behavior that has been reinforced by that stimulus? A. Discriminative stimulus, SD. B. Conditioned punisher. C. Motivating operation, MO. D. Stimulus control. Answer, C. Motivating operation, MO. This question introduces the concept of a motivating operation, MO, which is really important for understanding why someone might be motivated to do something at a particular time. The phrase, momentarily changes the effectiveness of a stimulus as a reinforcer, is the key clue here. An MO makes a reinforcer more or less valuable right now, and also affects the likelihood of behaviors that have gotten that reinforcer in the past. For example, if you haven't eaten all day, food becomes a much more effective reinforcer, its value increases, and you're more likely to engage in behaviors like looking for food or asking for a snack. Think of MOs as influences that change how much you want something and how likely you are to work for it. They are about motivation. Question 2. When measuring behavior, what is the difference between frequency and rate? A. Frequency is per unit of time, while rate is just a count. B. Frequency is used for discrete behaviors, rate is for continuous behaviors. C. Rate is frequency divided by time. D. There is no difference, they are the same thing. Answer, C. Rate is frequency divided by time. This question is asking about two related ways to measure behavior, frequency and rate. The crucial difference is that rate adds the element of time into the measurement. Frequency is simply a count of how many times a behavior happened. Rate is that same count, frequency, but divided by the length of the observation period, like per minute, per hour, or per day. So, if a child hit 5 times in 30 minutes, the frequency is 5, but the rate is 5 hits per 30 minutes, or 10 hits per hour. Including time makes rate a more useful measure when observation periods vary. Remember, rate is frequency with time, how often it happens in a specific time frame. Question 3. When defining a behavior for measurement or intervention, it is most important that the definition is A. Complex and detailed. B. Agreed upon by multiple observers. C. Observable and measurable. D. Based on the person's feelings. Answer, C. Observable and measurable. This question is about how we write good behavior definitions in ABA. The absolute most important characteristics of a behavior definition are that it must be observable, you can see or hear the behavior happening, and measurable, you can count, time, or otherwise quantify it. A clear definition helps everyone involved understand exactly what behavior they are looking for and measuring, which is critical for consistency and accuracy. We don't define behaviors based on someone's internal thoughts or feelings because we can't directly observe or measure those. For example, instead of being angry, you define it as screaming, hitting the table, and throwing objects. Make sure your definitions are like clear instructions someone else could follow. Question 4. A child throws their toy, and their parent immediately picks it up and gives it back, saying, "Oh no, you threw it." In the future, the child throws the toy more often. What is the likely function of the child's toy throwing behavior in this scenario? A. Escape. B. Tangible. C. Attention. D. Automatic. Answer, C. Attention. This question is asking about the function of the behavior, which is why the behavior is happening. In this scenario, the child throws the toy, behavior, and the parent provides interaction, picking up the toy and saying something, consequence. Since the behavior increased in the future, this consequence served as a reinforcer. The type of reinforcer the child received was attention from the parent. The child wasn't escaping anything, getting a specific item they didn't already have, tangible, or getting sensory input just from the throwing itself, automatic. They were getting the parent's reaction, which reinforced the throwing. The key is identifying what the person gets or avoids immediately after the behavior that makes it happen again. In this case, it was attention. Question 5. Which of the following procedures involves delivering a stimulus immediately following a behavior, which results in a decrease in the future frequency of that behavior? A. Positive reinforcement. B. Negative reinforcement. C. Positive punishment. D. Negative punishment. Answer: C. Positive punishment. This question defines positive punishment. The crucial elements are delivering a stimulus, adding something, which is the positive part, and it resulting in a decrease in the future frequency of that behavior, which is the punishment part. Positive punishment means you add something, like a startling noise or an unpleasant consequence, right after a behavior occurs, and because of that, the behavior happens less often in the future. For example, if a child touches a hot stove, behavior, and feels pain, adding an unpleasant stimulus, they are less likely to touch the stove again. Remember, positive punishment is adding something to make the behavior happen less often. Question 6. A behavior analyst wants to find the most preferred type of juice for a client. They offer 2 types of juice at a time, recording which one the client chooses until all possible pairs have been presented. This is an example of which preference assessment method? A. Free operant. B. Single stimulus. C. Paired stimulus. D. Multiple stimulus without replacement. Answer: C. Paired stimulus. This question describes the paired stimulus preference assessment method, also known as the forced choice method. The key phrase is, offer 2 types of juice at a time, recording which one the client chooses until all possible pairs have been presented. In this assessment, items are presented in pairs, and the learner chooses one from each pair. By seeing which item is chosen over others repeatedly, you can create a hierarchy of preferences from most to least preferred. This is different from just letting them play freely, free operant, or presenting items one at a time, single stimulus. When you see items offered in pairs, think paired stimulus. Question 7. What dimension of behavior measures the time between a stimulus, like a direction or cue, and the start of the behavior? A. Duration. B. Latency. C. Frequency. D. Inter-response time, IRT. Answer: B. Latency. This question is asking about latency, another way we measure behavior. Latency specifically measures the time it takes for a behavior to start after a specific instruction or event occurs. Think of it as reaction time. If you say, stand up, the time between you saying it and the person beginning to stand is the latency. Duration is how long the behavior lasts once it starts, frequency is how many times it happens, and IRT is the time between 2 consecutive instances of the same behavior. Latency is all about the gap between the cue and the start of the response. A quick tip: latency is like waiting for the behavior to launch after the signal. Question 8. Teaching a learner to respond differently in the presence of different stimuli is called A. Generalization. B. Discrimination training. C. Shaping. D. Prompting. Answer: B. Discrimination training. This question describes discrimination training. The core idea is teaching someone to discriminate or tell the difference between stimuli and respond appropriately to each. This means doing a behavior when a specific stimulus, an SD, is present because reinforcement is available, but not doing the behavior, or doing a different behavior, when a different stimulus, an S delta, is present because reinforcement is not available. For example, teaching a child to say, car, only when they see a picture of a car, SD, and not when they see a picture of a truck, S delta, is discrimination training. It's about teaching them when to do a behavior and when not to. Question 9. When a speaker asks for something they want or need, like saying, water, because they are thirsty, this type of verbal behavior is called A. Tact. B. Mand. C. Echoic. D. Intraverbal. Answer, B. Mand. This question is about the verbal behavior operant called a mand. A mand is essentially a request or a demand. It's controlled by a motivating operation, like being thirsty, and is reinforced by getting the specific item or action requested, like getting water. The key is that it's asking for something because you want or need it. Saying, water, because you see water is a tact, repeating, water, after someone says it is an echoic, and saying, water, when someone says, what do you drink, is an intraverbal. Mands are all about getting needs/wants met through language. Think of mand as demand or command. Question 10. Taking away a token or a point from a learner contingent on a behavior, resulting in a decrease in that behavior in the future, is an example of A. Response cost. B. Timeout. C. Negative reinforcement. D. Extinction. Answer, A. Response cost. This scenario describes the punishment procedure called response cost. The core idea of response cost is that a specific amount of a reinforcer the person already possesses, like tokens, points, privileges, or money, is removed or lost contingent on the behavior, and this removal makes the behavior less likely in the future. Taking away tokens is a classic example. Timeout involves removing access to all reinforcement temporarily. Negative reinforcement makes a behavior increase by removing something unpleasant, and extinction involves stopping reinforcement for a behavior. Response cost is specifically about taking away something of value the person already has. Question 11. A temporary increase in the frequency, intensity, or duration of a behavior when an extinction procedure is first implemented is known as A. Spontaneous recovery. B. Extinction burst. C. Punishment. D. Behavioral contrast. Answer, B. Extinction burst. This question is defining the extinction burst, a common phenomenon that happens when you first stop reinforcing a behavior that was previously reinforced. When the behavior no longer gets the expected reward, it might temporarily get worse, happening more often, stronger, or lasting longer, as the individual essentially tries harder to get the reinforcement back. They might also show new behaviors, like frustration. It's important to expect and weather the extinction burst when implementing extinction, as it usually means the procedure is working. Spontaneous recovery is when the behavior temporarily reappears later. Remember, an extinction burst is like a final surge or explosion of the behavior before it starts to decrease. Question 12. Which interval recording method requires the behavior to occur continuously throughout the entire interval for it to be recorded? A. Momentary time sampling. B. Partial interval recording. C. Whole interval recording. D. Frequency. Answer, C. Whole interval recording. This question is asking about the whole interval recording measurement method. In this technique, you divide your observation time into intervals. You only mark the behavior as occurring if it happens for the entire duration of the interval. This method is often used for behaviors you want to increase, like staying on task, and tends to underestimate the total occurrence of the behavior. Partial interval recording just requires it to happen at any point, and momentary time sampling requires it only at the end of the interval. Frequency is a count. A good way to remember, whole interval means the behavior must fill the whole interval. Question 13. A child rocks back and forth because it feels good to them, and the sensory input itself makes them more likely to rock in the future. This behavior is most likely maintained by A. Social positive reinforcement. B. Social negative reinforcement. C. Automatic positive reinforcement. D. Automatic negative reinforcement. Answer: C. Automatic positive reinforcement. This question describes automatic positive reinforcement. The key here is that the reinforcement is automatic, meaning it doesn't involve another person, it's not social. The behavior, rocking, produces the consequence, the feeling or sensory input, directly, without anyone else's involvement. Since this sensory input makes the behavior more likely in the future, and it's being added by the behavior itself, the feeling is produced, it's positive reinforcement. Therefore, it's automatic positive reinforcement. An example is scratching an itch. The scratching behavior automatically produces the relief, removal of itch, could be seen as automatic negative R, or singing to yourself because you like the sound, automatic positive R. This example is about the positive feeling being added. Question 14. When a behavior trained in one setting occurs in other settings or situations where it hasn't been specifically taught, this is called A. Discrimination. B. Generalization. C. Shaping. D. Fading. Answer: B. Generalization. This question describes generalization. Generalization is when a learned behavior spreads or occurs in new environments, with different people, at different times, or with different, but similar, materials than those used during training. It's important because we want skills learned in therapy or school to actually be used in the real world. For example, if a child learns to say hello to their therapist, and then starts saying hello to their teacher and classmates without being specifically taught to do so, that's generalization. Discrimination is the opposite, learning to respond only in specific situations. Generalization is about the behavior happening in new places or ways. Question 15. When selecting a measurement procedure for a behavior, the most important factor to consider is A. The cost of the measurement tool. B. Whether the procedure accurately captures the dimensions of the behavior. C. How many observers are available. D. How easy the procedure is to implement. Answer: B. Whether the procedure accurately captures the dimensions of the behavior. This question asks about the most important thing to consider when choosing how to measure a behavior. While things like ease of implementation and available resources matter, the primary goal is accuracy. You need to pick a measurement method that truly reflects what the behavior is doing. If the behavior happens really fast and you need to count every instance, frequency might be best. If it's a continuous behavior, duration or interval recording might be better. Choosing the right method ensures your data is meaningful and tells you the truth about whether your intervention is working. Accuracy in measurement is fundamental in ABA. Question 16. In ABA, reinforcement and punishment are defined by their effect on A. The topography of the behavior. B. The immediate consequence that follows the behavior. C. The future frequency of the behavior. D. The feelings of the individual. Answer, C. The future frequency of the behavior. This is a critical concept in ABA. Reinforcement and punishment are always defined by their effect on the behavior in the future. It doesn't matter what the consequence looks or feels like, if the behavior doesn't increase, for reinforcement, or decrease, for punishment, in the future, then it wasn't reinforcement or punishment for that individual in that context. The consequence is what happens right after, but the definition relies on the resulting change in how often the behavior occurs later on. We are always looking at how the consequence impacts the future likelihood of the behavior. Question 17. When a speaker labels something in the environment, like saying, book, because they see a book, this type of verbal behavior is called A. Tact. B. Mand. C. Echoic. D. Intraverbal. Answer, A. Tact. This question describes the verbal behavior operant called a tact. A tact is controlled by a nonverbal stimulus in the environment, seeing, hearing, smelling, feeling something, and is reinforced by generalized conditioned reinforcement, like praise, that's right. It's a book. It's essentially labeling or naming something you perceive with your senses. Saying, book, because you see a book is a tact. Asking for a book is a mand, repeating, book, is an echoic, and saying, book, when someone says, you read a, is an intraverbal. Tacting is about commenting on the environment. Think of tact as contact with the environment through language. Question 18. A visual schedule that shows a child the steps for getting ready in the morning serves as A. Reinforcer. B. Punisher. C. Motivating operation, MO. D. Discriminative stimulus, SD. Answer, D. Discriminative stimulus, SD. This question provides an example of a discriminative stimulus, SD. A visual schedule is a cue or signal in the environment that tells the child what behavior to do, follow the steps, and that doing those behaviors will likely lead to a positive outcome, like successfully getting ready, receiving praise, or getting to breakfast on time. The schedule sets the occasion for the sequence of getting ready behaviors to occur because following the schedule has been reinforced in the past. It's not a reinforcer itself, nor a punisher, and while it might relate to motivation, MO, its direct function here is signaling the opportunity for reinforcement based on specific actions. Think of the visual schedule as a go signal for the morning routine. Question 19. What is the purpose of calculating inter-observer agreement, IOA? A. To see if the intervention is effective. B. To determine if the reinforcer is strong enough. C. To assess the reliability of the data collection. D. To identify the function of the behavior. Answer, C. To assess the reliability of the data collection. This question is about inter-observer agreement, IOA. IOA is calculated when two or more observers independently measure the same behavior at the same time and then compare their results. The main purpose of doing this is to check the reliability, or consistency, of the data being collected. A high IOA percentage suggests that the behavior definition is clear and observers are measuring the behavior in the same way, making the data more trustworthy. It doesn't tell you if the intervention worked or the function of the behavior, it's about ensuring your measurement is accurate and consistent. Think of it as making sure everyone is on the same page when counting or timing behavior. Question 20. Which reinforcement schedule typically produces a pattern of responding characterized by a pause after reinforcement, followed by a gradually accelerating rate of response, scallop effect? A. Fixed ratio, FR. B. Variable ratio, VR. C. Fixed interval, phi. D. Variable interval, 6. Answer, C. Fixed interval, FI. This question describes the typical pattern of responding seen with a fixed interval, FI, schedule of reinforcement. In an FI schedule, the first response after a fixed amount of time has passed is reinforced. Learners often learn to wait until the end of the interval is near before responding, resulting in a pattern where responding is low right after reinforcement, the pause, and then increases as the interval nears its end, creating a scallop shape on a graph. Variable interval schedules produce steady rates, and ratio schedules produce high rates without pauses, FR, or with inconsistent pauses, VR. The scallop is the key to FI. Question 21. A behavior is considered functional if A. It looks normal or typical. B. It serves a purpose for the individual, allowing them to get something or escape something. C. It occurs at a high frequency. D. It can be easily measured. Answer, B. It serves a purpose for the individual, allowing them to get something or escape something. This question relates back to the function of behavior, but asks about what makes a behavior functional. In ABA, functional doesn't mean normal or appropriate, it means that the behavior works for the individual in their environment to produce a specific consequence that maintains it. This consequence is usually getting access to something desired, like attention, a tangible item, or sensory input, or escaping/avoiding something undesired, like a task or an unpleasant situation. Understanding the function is key to changing the behavior, as we need to teach a new, more appropriate behavior that serves the same function. It's about the behavior working to achieve a result for the person. Question 22. A therapist is teaching a child to wave goodbye. Initially, the therapist takes the child's hand and moves it in a waving motion, full physical prompt. Over several sessions, the therapist reduces the amount of physical guidance until they are just touching the child's elbow, then just gesturing, and finally the child waves independently when the person leaves. This process of reducing prompts is called A. Shaping, B. Chaining, C. Discrimination training, D. Fading. Answer, D. Fading. This question is a clear example of fading. Fading is the process where you gradually reduce or eliminate the prompts you are using to help the learner perform a behavior. You start with a stronger prompt, like full physical, and slowly make it less intrusive, partial physical, then gestural, then no prompt, as the learner becomes more independent. The goal is for the behavior to come under the control of the natural cue, seeing someone leave, instead of the prompt. Shaping is teaching a new behavior by reinforcing approximations, chaining is breaking down a skill into steps, and discrimination training is teaching different responses to different stimuli. Fading is all about lessening the help. Question 23. Teaching a learner to engage in a behavior that is incompatible with a problem behavior, and reinforcing only the incompatible behavior, is a basic form of A. Punishment, B. Extinction, C. Differential reinforcement, D. Response blocking. Answer, C. Differential reinforcement. This question describes a core strategy within differential reinforcement, DR. Differential reinforcement means reinforcing one behavior while putting other behaviors, like the problem behavior, on extinction, not reinforcing them. A common type is differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, DRE, where you reinforce a behavior that the person cannot do at the same time as the problem behavior, example reinforcing hands in pockets, which is incompatible with hitting. The question simplifies this to the basic idea of reinforcing an incompatible behavior. It's a reinforcement-based strategy, not punishment, extinction on its own, or blocking. DR is about reinforcing the right behavior while withholding reinforcement for the wrong one. Question 24. If you wanted to measure how many completed homework assignments a student turned in over a week, the best measurement method would be A. Duration. B. Frequency. C. Latency. D. Permanent product. Answer: D. Permanent product. This question asks about the most appropriate measurement method for a specific scenario. Measuring completed homework assignments is best done using permanent product recording. Permanent product means measuring the outcome or result of a behavior after the behavior has occurred, rather than observing the behavior directly as it happens. The completed assignments are the permanent product left behind by the behavior of doing homework. You don't need to watch the student doing the homework, frequency, duration, latency, you just count the finished assignments. This method is great when the behavior leaves a lasting result. Question 25. A teaching procedure where a complex skill is broken down into smaller, sequential steps, and each step is taught one after the other is called A. Shaping. B. Task analysis. C. Forward chaining. D. Behavior chain. Answer: C. Forward chaining. This question describes forward chaining, a common way to teach skills using a task analysis. A task analysis breaks the skill into steps like brushing teeth, turn on water, wet brush, get toothpaste, etc. In forward chaining, you teach the first step until the learner can do it independently, then you teach the first and second steps, and so on, teaching the chain from beginning to end. The behavior chain itself is the sequence of steps, but forward chaining is a procedure for teaching that chain starting from the beginning. Shaping teaches a single behavior through approximations. Chaining teaches a sequence of behaviors. Forward chaining starts teaching the sequence from the front.